What if I told you everything you learned about the start of World War I was an oversimplification? You were probably taught that the assassination of an archduke lit the fuse for the Great War. Well, that's true. It was just the spark that ignited a powder keg that had been filling for decades. It wasn't just the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, it was something far darker, a web of ambition, fear, and secret pacts that made a global conflict almost inevitable. To truly understand why the world plunged into darkness in 1914, we need to rewind the clock. Let's go back to the late 19th century, a time of immense change and simmering tension across Europe. The continent was a chessboard, and the major powers were all moving their pieces, trying to gain an edge. This wasn't a game of friendly competition. It was a deadly serious struggle for dominance. At the heart of it all was the rise of a newly unified Germany in 1871. Led by the shrewd Otto von Bismarck, Germany quickly became an industrial and military powerhouse. This sudden shift in power made its neighbors, particularly France, very nervous. France had suffered a humiliating defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, losing the valuable territories of Alsace and Lorraine. This loss fueled a deep-seated desire for revenge, or revanche, which became a cornerstone of French foreign policy for the next 40 years. Bismarck, a master of diplomacy, understood this danger. His primary goal was to keep France isolated and prevent a two-front war against both France and Russia. He skillfully engineered a series of complex alliances. The most significant of these was the Triple Alliance, a defensive pact formed in 1880 between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. The idea was simple: an attack on one was an attack on all. This created a powerful central bloc in Europe, but it also sowed the seeds of division. While Germany was building its alliance system, the other great powers were not sitting idle. The British Empire, with its globe-spanning navy and vast colonial holdings, was playing a game of splendid isolation. They preferred to stay out of continental squabbles, focusing instead on protecting their trade routes and empire. However, Germany's growing ambitions began to change that. Then, in 1890, everything changed. The young and ambitious Kaiser Wilhelm II came to the throne in Germany and dismissed Bismarck. Wilhelm had a very different vision for Germany's future. He wanted Germany to have its place in the sun. He abandoned Bismarck's cautious diplomacy and embarked on an aggressive foreign policy, known as Weltpolitik, or world policy. One of the most provocative elements of this new policy was the decision to build a massive navy. This was a direct challenge to Great Britain's naval supremacy, the very foundation of its global power. The ensuing Anglo-German naval arms race was one of the most critical factors leading to the war. Britain, which had seen Germany as a potential partner, now viewed it as its primary rival. The race to build bigger, faster, and more powerful battleships, like the famous dreadnought, created an atmosphere of intense paranoia and hostility. Feeling threatened by Germany's aggression, France and Russia saw a common enemy. In 1894, they formed their own secret alliance, the Franco-Russian Alliance. This was Bismarck's worst nightmare come true. Germany was now officially sandwiched between two hostile powers. The continent was dividing into two armed camps. Britain, alarmed by Germany's naval expansion and aggressive posture, began to rethink its policy of isolation. In 1904, it signed the Entente Cordiale with its historic rival, France. This wasn't a formal military alliance, but it was a friendly understanding that settled colonial disputes and signaled a major shift in European alignments. 3 years later, in 1907, Britain and Russia resolved their own differences in Asia, creating the Triple Entente. So now, the stage was set: the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy on one side, and the Triple Entente of France, Russia, and Great Britain on the other. This alliance system, designed to create security, actually made war more likely. It was like a series of tripwires stretching across the continent. A conflict between any two nations had the potential to drag everyone else in. A small, regional dispute could now escalate into a massive European war. This is a crucial point that is often missed. The alliances turned a potential brushfire into a guaranteed inferno. But it wasn't just about alliances. Another powerful force was at play: nationalism. In the early 20th century, patriotism was at a fever pitch. People felt an intense loyalty to their countries and believed in their nation's cultural, economic, and military supremacy. This was especially true in the Balkans, a region often called the powder keg of Europe. The decaying Ottoman Empire had lost its grip on the region, creating a power vacuum. Various ethnic groups, like the Serbs, Bulgarians, Romanians, and Greeks, were all clamoring for independence and to create larger, unified nations. This was particularly potent in Serbia, which dreamed of uniting all South Slavic peoples into a single state, a Greater Serbia. This ambition put Serbia on a direct collision course with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austria-Hungary was a sprawling, multi-ethnic empire, and it feared that Serbian nationalism would inspire its own Slavic populations to rebel and break away. The empire had annexed the provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908, which had a large Serb population, further infuriating Serbia and its powerful protector, Russia. For Austria-Hungary, crushing Serbian nationalism became a matter of survival. Alongside nationalism and alliances, there was the relentless engine of imperialism. The great powers were in a frantic race to build global empires, competing for colonies in Africa and Asia. This competition for resources, markets, and prestige created constant friction. For example, Germany's attempts to challenge French control over Morocco in 1905 and 1911 nearly led to war and further strengthened the bond between Britain and France. Everyone believed that a vast empire was essential for national greatness and economic strength, and they were willing to fight for it. Finally, we have to talk about militarism. This was more than just building up armies, it was a cultural mindset. Military leaders had enormous influence on politicians. War was often romanticized and seen as a noble and heroic tool of foreign policy, a way to solve problems and prove a nation's strength. Every major power had developed intricate and rigid military plans. The most famous of these was Germany's Schlieffen Plan. It was designed to solve the problem of a two-front war. The plan called for a lightning-fast attack to knock out France by invading through neutral Belgium and then quickly moving the bulk of the army to the east to face Russia. The problem with these plans was their inflexibility. They were based on precise railway timetables and mobilization schedules. Once a country started mobilizing its army, it was like a runaway train. The military logic would take over, making it almost impossible for diplomats to de-escalate a crisis. So, let's bring it all together. By the summer of 1914, Europe was a pressure cooker. You had the rigid, opposing alliance systems. You had the intense nationalism, especially in the Balkans. You had the fierce imperial rivalries creating friction across the globe. And you had the pervasive culture of militarism, with war plans that were almost impossible to stop once started. All it needed was a spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914, in the Bosnian city of Sarajevo. A young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip, part of a secret society known as the Black Hand, assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. For Austria-Hungary, this was the last straw. They saw it as a direct attack by the Serbian state and the perfect excuse to crush Serbia once and for all. They issued an ultimatum to Serbia with a series of demands so harsh that they were designed to be rejected. When Serbia failed to meet every single demand, Austria-Hungary, with a blank check of unconditional support from Germany, declared war on July 28, 1914, and now the tripwires of the alliance system were triggered one by one. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples, began to mobilize its massive army to support Serbia. Germany, seeing Russian mobilization, activated the Schlieffen Plan. They declared war on Russia and then on France. To get to France, German troops marched into Belgium. The invasion of neutral Belgium was the final straw for Britain, which had pledged to protect Belgian neutrality. On August 4th, Great Britain declared war on Germany. Within a week, all the great powers of Europe were at war. The complex web of alliances, fueled by nationalism, imperialism, and militarism, had done its deadly work. The assassination of the Archduke wasn't the cause of the war, it was merely the pretext. It was the geopolitical equivalent of a single snowflake starting an avalanche that had been building for decades. The Great War was not an accident, it was a tragedy born from years of fear, ambition, and a collective failure of diplomacy. The world would never be the same again. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into history. If you found this explanation helpful and want to see more content that goes beyond the headlines, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us create more videos like this. We'll see you in the next one.